Well, my name is Reverend Devi Grace, and I'm here on the west coast of the United States in the mountains of Southern California. And I experienced my childhood near-death experiences in a place that was ancient Chumash ancestral grounds, inland from the Channel Islands National Park. And we have records of the indigenous people being there 10,000 years ago in Malibu and also in the Conejo Valley. So I realized that I had a tremendous amount of support and assistance from the ancient Native Americans who called that their homeland many, many thousands of years before. At the time, I was only 4 years old for the first near-death experience, and it happened very early one morning with another member of my family. And so I was strangled to death as a result of what you would call ancestral family issues from transgenerational trauma. What I experienced was a loss of oxygen, right? My oxygen ran out. And so it's death by asphyxiation. And it happened very, very early in the morning. So, the whole room was very, very dark, and the house obviously was very, very quiet because it was the wee hours of the morning. And as the Egyptians have stated, it kind of felt like initially I went into the bardos, right, of this very dark, mysterious, frightening, overwhelming space. And it was not fun, to say the least. And yet I knew that I wasn't alone in the darkness. And eventually I was asked to breathe, not with my human body, because I knew that I was in my spirit body. I was asked to breathe the breath of spirit, or breathe the breath of life. And you could say that that was maybe the Ruach HaKodesh whispering in my ears, or the Spiritus Sanctus, or the Holy Spirit. I had company. And so as I breathed this energy, prana, life force, into my energy form, the blackness started to change into a radiant darkness, kind of like what you can see when you look at polished obsidian stone. And so that created a reassurance that even though I was surrounded by this great blackness, that I was no longer in danger, and that my life was no longer in danger, and that I had benevolent company that introduced me to the fact that I was going to be escorted through a Stargate or a wormhole or some portals so that we could relocate out of the bardos and take me to this council meeting that was specially prepared for me because I was the special guest of honor. And because I was a child, I wasn't taken to like a regular end of life review council. I was escorted into what the First Nations people call an ancestral council gathering that was deeply concerned about, why the children were being killed on this planet and what could be done to prevent that from happening again. They realized that I was in great peril and that my life obviously was in harm, and that I wasn't the only child on the planet that was experiencing these unfortunate acts of aggression or domination. And so I was escorted through what you would call multiple wormhole vortexes, and they're kind of like spiraling elevators. And we ascended out of the bardos and into what you would call more radiant fields of iridescent or almost opalescent light. It was light of every color, except it wasn't like glaring me in the face with its vibrancy. All of the hues were in there, but it was kind of like a creamy, like I said, pearl iridescence or a shimmer. And I felt that I was being assisted to travel through all these different gateways of consciousness with the shining ones. And as I reached into this gathering, or this very important council meeting, I realized that, kind of like a medicine wheel, that there was rings within rings within rings within rings of sacred illuminated ones that had gathered to hear my report. And so it was kind of invited into my space to step up to, quote unquote, the podium and discuss with them how I died. And then they were going to discuss with me why I died, which had nothing to do with me. So I was given the reassurance, that I'm not being cross-examined. It wasn't like a traditional end-of-life review that many adults talk about in terms of, reflecting on all of the choice points that I had made for my whole 4 years of life. It was more of, you are innocent, my child, and we have chosen you to come and help us understand, help us understand what's still going on in that nuclear family unit that doesn't work. And that is obviously having significant challenge and requires a lot of assistance to set those patterns of conflict free. And so I was given this incredible hug, right, of reassurance, of like, you've done nothing wrong. Most children that have violent experiences, the child brain, even the child eternal mind, has a tendency to, wonder, did I do something wrong? Did I miss something very important? Is that why I'm dead? Because I knew I was dead right away. And they reassured me that, again, I'm not to accept, quote unquote, responsibility, because this was much bigger than me. So it's not like this is my karma. It's not like my soul, was like learning a lesson. This wasn't about, some karmic lesson. It's much bigger about, how do we help the human family recover from centuries of breakdown. Because of my pre-birth planning, I had enough of my knowing, or gnosis, that I have been chosen to report on these issues. So I was having a bit of a deja vu of like, oh, this kind of feels like my pre-birth planning, right? Council meetings. So there was meetings before I was born, and then there's meetings right in the middle of a near-death experience, because there's a sincere desire to investigate. There are divine laws. And so part of my job is, I was kind of like special agent in disguise as a child. I already came in with a very awakened consciousness. So I wasn't really a 4-year-old. I wasn't a regular human upon arrival. Special agent sent in to investigate these matters on the planet, if that makes sense. And therefore I recognized some of the council members, because they have obviously, visited me during pregnancy. You hear of children that have memories from the womb. So, that's me. I had a very active psychic life in my mother's womb, obviously, because I was being prepared to play my part in this grand, a sacred court or tribunal in the heavens to bring more love to the human race. I stood before this radiant ring of impressive, astounding, brilliant ancestors, more light than I even could palpably appreciate upon initial arrival, because it was so all-consuming, like light that saturates you just because of its effervescence, right? And so part of the reason why they turned up the volume on their light was to help me also recover from what I had just been through. They were like doing surgeries on me, light body surgeries, And so like my energy body was being put back together. So in some sense, they were like surgeons, right? Divine surgeons. And so all of those surgeries were taking place just so I could come back into a place of composure and centeredness so that we could have the deeper discussion, because they asked me, what do you need? What do you need to recover from what you just went through? Because yes, we did ask you to endure this for a higher purpose. However, we're not in your shoes right now. So you could kind of imagine that these grandmothers came behind me and literally kind of like when those babies screaming, they kind of rocked me, right? To ease and reassure my soul that the infinite eternal presence had got everything under control. And that I didn't have to figure out, right, next steps, because they made it really clear that this also was the dispensation of grace that I was scheduled to receive, because I just went through the most horrendous ordeal a child could ever be put through, right? When you have a loss of life, it's pretty overwhelming. And so once you would say the surgeries were completed, then kind of like the Ancestral Council parted, and a manifestation of like the Divine Mother stepped forward. The mother of all life. Almost makes you want to weep, because she addressed me as my child. I am your mother, and nothing on that planet can ever take you from me. And nothing on that planet could ever separate us. And so to help your humanity receive this promise, because it's a promise from the Divine Mother. Ancient cultures call her the Great Goddess. You know, some of her names are like Isis or Sophia. She said, I am the giver of all life. All life is born through my universal womb. And so she basically promised that I could go back to this planet called Earth with a very powerful or strong part of her soul, which is also a part of my soul. She called it the Gayatri, as they call the Divine Holy Mother in India. And so she said, I am going to be sending you back to the planet with the Gayatri, which is also the Shekinah in Judaism, right? Or the Emma in the Tree of Life mysticism. So she has many different names. And she said, I am sending you back with a part of your big light. I'm sending you back with a part of your eternal connection to me. She did basically announce, I'm not sending you back to that planet without more safety, without more protection, and without more love. And I am, fierce love of the Divine Holy Mother, and I go back with you. However, before we send you back, we need to help some of our other allies, ancient allies, understand the challenges that the human race faces in their most vulnerable or darkest hours. And so we did an assessment of the planet, and we calculated how many children were in danger at that time on the planet. So it's like a global scan. Okay, so you're dead, and where's this issue also impacting all these other children on all these other continents and in all these other cultures, so we can get present to the impact of the situation. And then I kind of raised my hand and basically said, yes, I would appreciate and love the miracle that helps heal this for the children of humanity. And so then she turned into liquid gold and she physically filled my whole body like a waterfall, right? Because I was being infused with her golden liquid light. And that's when she gave me the code word. Your name is Gayatri. You came in with a human body, you came in with a human personality, you came in with a human identity. However, your soul is always a part of me, and I am always a part of you. And this golden light is reminding your soul that you are one with me, and I am one with you. I agreed to return, knowing that I would still require a tremendous amount of surgeries upon re-entering into my body, and that they were going to take me back right through some of the same wormhole or elevator passages. And so I returned in through what you would call the bindu, right, or the backside of my head. That's usually called the higher self. And it's kind of like a spiral, kind of like, spiraling yourself back into your body. But I couldn't move. I was still quite paralyzed. And I literally laid there before dawn. The other party had left the room, and like legions of angels came in and were still facilitating what you would call a surgery to like resuscitate my lifeless body. And again, it's the principle of you don't get the heartbeat started until you get the breath started. So they started, repairing my throat, repairing my esophagus, repairing, my crushed lungs. Like, breathe, my child. We're still here. So the angels kind of had to breathe, my organs into working again and resuscitate me. So it wasn't like a human CPR team. It was like an angelic CPR team. And it was like, this is how we're going to get your organ systems, respiratory system, then circulatory system cooperating so we can get oxygen back into your blood, so we can get that oxygen back into your brain, and then we can start the reentry process. And the angels made it real clear that I also had a really good friend, and that friend was the whole planet. And so I did live in a more rural area, not country, but more rural. And I was surrounded by this beautiful park, not that far from a waterfall where the Chumash, right, would go and collect their waters. And so I could feel the Native American relationship with the land. It was the ancient love affair between the Chumash and the land, and the land and the Chumash. And so in some sense, and the Chumash, ancient ones, were there calling me back, which is why it was scheduled for me to die in that particular location, because the Chumash were called the Rainbow Walkers. And in some sense, they were just walking me over the Rainbow Bridge and back into my human body. And culturally, this is something that they're actually known for worldwide. I did die a second time at age 10, and that is a whole other, interview. Won't necessarily get into that today. However, the aspect that brought me back in 1983 was the divine equivalent of the Great Mother, the Great Father's presence. And so, part A is resuscitation from the Great Mother. Part B is resuscitation from the Great Father. Through my own courage to eventually, in my late 20s, kind of come out of the closet with my childhood experiences with an organization called the International Association for Near-Death Studies, which had a very developed chapter down in San Diego. So I was already studying spiritual ministry in the mystery schools, and it was recommended by my advisors in those spiritual mystery schools that I attend the IONS meetings. And very quickly, I was able to connect with a lot of the authors and the primary international researchers that they had, such as PMH Atwater, who had already been documenting childhood near-death experiences at that point for at least 5 years. And after successfully sharing my, at first overwhelming and very difficult experience that turned into or transitioned into a radiant near-death experience, I was asked to participate in one of her research studies for a second book that she was doing on childhood near-death experiences. And so Ions was okay with me talking about the fact that I communicated with cosmic levels of consciousness during my near-death experience. However, when I was utilizing the terminology, that I had a very significant upgrade during that process that human researchers call a walk-in, that was something that was beyond their lexicon, right, of their research categories. And so I sought out another global organization called We International, or Walk-ins for Evolution, that Liz Nelson started, because I realized that perhaps I had gone as far as I could go, right, with ASSIST, American Center for the Integration of Spiritually Transformative Experiences, and I was moving into new pioneering territory. And when I went to my first We International conference, I was the youngest one there. Most of them were in their 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s. And I was the only one at that conference that had childhood walk-ins. So I learned that that was, again, more of an unusual category. Same thing that P.M. Chatwater is saying. You know, by and large, we have more adults on the planet that are having near-death experiences than children. And the same thing for walk-ins. So that's why it's not as well understood. And that children face, you know, different complications than adults because our minds aren't fully developed. Dr. Bruce Lipton uses this term called, you know, hypnagogic state of human development from age 1 to age 7. So when I died at age 4, you know, I'm experiencing multidimensional reality without my human personality even fully developed. And so I blast open into holographic intelligence or holographic consciousness, and then, you know, returned to my body with a direct relationship with the Divine Mother and a direct relationship with ancient avatars. And that right there made it very difficult for me to relate to my peers, right? Or my siblings, or, you know, regular childhood playtime, because I had already been catapulted into what you would call galactic politics, you know, for the fate of the human species, because they were unable to protect their young. So, you know, it was awesome to find out that I had all these walk-in big brothers and sisters that had just been on the path, you know, quite a few more years than me. However, they recognized that I was kind of like that new model, like, well, kid, we haven't seen your model, because I had had so many walk-ins, not just one, not just two, you know, not just three, but, you know, at that point I had 4 walk-ins. A walk-in is a very large shift in the structure and organization of our consciousness, so that one dimension, like our human aspect, right, might leave, and another dimension or another aspect of our soul come in, and we have an experience of a soul transfer or a soul exchange. It's all light, however, right? It's not the same frequency of light residing within the body. The one frequency of light transitions and another frequency of light arrives, the arrival. The arrival is called the walk-in. Now, sometimes that exchange happens very clean, you know, outgoing, incoming, and other times the walk-in is braided with the original soul aspect. When a soul is braided, sometimes they are braided for an entire lifetime, or sometimes they are braided for a particular duration of your earth mission or your earth assignment. So it doesn't mean that it's permanent. Some braids are temporary. Then there are walk-ins that are composite souls. And so the braids no longer stay independent The braids actually go through a synthesis and they merge. And so that is more of a soul merge, walk in. And those are aspects from more of the highest self coming in to reside within the human body. So walk-ins are all about evolution. The other category of walk-ins is from the oversoul. Some of you have seen that there are gradations, and the oversoul aspects can wake down into the human carrier body. And so that is also an oversoul walk-in, and that is more of my design. So I do partner with the organization called Ancestors Within. And yes, you did ask me to bring the book, right? This is just the second volume of a 4-volume series. And I am one of about 101 stories of ancestral transformation. We had the Ancestors Within Summit last fall. And my area of specialty is ancestral path cutting, or the purification of those genetic codes in the RNA and the DNA. So it's the purification of the genetic patterning or genetic programming that gets passed on generation after generation after generation. So I'm the quantum scientist for the ancestral healing categories. Then the other organization is Beyond Being Human, that the Divine Union Academy has partnered with. And that is helping people realize that walk-ins are a part of human evolution. The species is bringing more of its multidimensional light body down into its physical vehicle. And so we're merging spirit and matter. And so we talk about, moving out of the caterpillar and into the butterfly. So this is about Beyond Being Human is the birthing of the new divine human. The quantum human, as Dr. Jean Houston calls it, which is working with our multidimensional love intelligence, and that love is our guiding force, and that we are brave enough to outgrow our bad habits, so to speak. The other area of stewardship that I'm very passionate about is with other global leadership organizations that are about the rebalance of power on a global scale out of what we would call domination culture from Dr. Rian Eisler and into partnership culture. So moving into love and respect from what we call whole systems intelligence and embodied leadership. And so I assist couples and teams and families and organizations in embodied leadership training so that they can bring forth more of their soul intelligence. And so this is that fulfillment of that promise that the race would be able to awaken out of those veils of amnesia and claim their actual divinity in their body, which is different than other generations past where you had to travel out of your body to connect with the supernatural. Now this is about bringing the supernatural and the radiance of heaven on earth inside of our body temples. So it's planetary yoga, right? It's not leaving the human body in order to access higher states of consciousness. It's physically integrating those higher states of consciousness into the dense cell structures. The different emblems, right, that I use, it's the phoenix and the dragon. And so the Divine Mother came to me as the phoenix, and the Divine Father came to me as the dragon. And they have this universal partnership, which has been, recorded in the Zohar, even with like Shekinah and Metatron. These are the mystical texts, right? The ancient scrolls. And so, as you can see in this image, it's the original Adam reborn and Eve restored in partnership with this true tree of life. And that is moving out of duality. The old tree of life, right, had separation and duality. And the original tree of life, the tree of love, the tree of grace, comes from that quantum unified field. So all of the violence, right, is the old patterns of not being able to access the wholeness of the original divine union. We have 2 landing pages set up for contact information. I'm known as the Oracle, right? So I don't have anything other than if you go to www.divineunionacademy.com, you can be reached by email or phone. You can also find me on Facebook, on social media through Speaking Tree of Life and Divine Union Foundation, right? Message me there. And then through the www.divineunionfoundation.org. That's more for couples because I do a tremendous amount of sacred marriage or sacred union ceremonies, helping couples to prepare for their weddings and also helping couples to prepare for their conscious conception ceremonies, right? So they can bring in awakened ones. And I also serve individuals in what the indigenous people call your rites of passage, right? Or your initiations. So as the oracle, I facilitate soul readings. However, it's about the embodied manifestation of your dharma. So I channel with people. And then we have individual retreats. People fly in from all over, America, and they do personal, custom, transformational retreats with me. Couples fly in from all over and do retreats with me. And then we facilitate group retreats with other facilitators about 4 times a year, in the spring, in the summer, and the fall, and the winter. And our next one will be coming up. It's a women's retreat in the summer, and it's for the women that know that they are members of the Ark of Grace lineage of the Divine Mother. For the couples, we really initiate them in the lineages of the ancient mystical marriage or alchemical marriage. And then in corporations, we really talk about how do we bring this ancient mysticism into our leadership roles. So I serve a lot of corporate mystics, right, or corporate shamans. And how do you balance technology and consciousness so that you can be very adept, right, in technology, and also be very gifted in your communication with all of these different dimensions of intelligence. And it's the spiritual intelligence then partnering with human innovation.